Hi, good evening, everyone. Hope you're all having a great day today. Hi from a very surprisingly warm and sunny Berkshire, England, in the UK. Welcome to my presentation on the DAM integration real-world fundamentals. As you know, my name is Peter Scoins, and let's get started. Okay, so just a little bit about my background first. I'm a technical consultant or a developer in DAM and have been for about 13 years now. I've worked for multiple partners, designing, implementing, or developing DAM solutions. Done most of the tasks from constructing metadata setups all the way down to being knee-deep in quicksand, trying to do some bug fixing. 3 words, basically, I love it. It's what I'm born to do. I've been doing it for so long now, I don't think I could do anything else. Although I started my journey on the implementation partners kind of side through vendors, I did join the customer side with Stanley Black Decker back in 2017. An interesting footnote, though, I've never actually worked for a DAM vendor. So if there is a DAM vendor out there that would like to hire me, hook me up. I'm also known in the industry really as British Pete. It's a personal brand of sorts of mine. I got that nickname many years ago whilst ordering coffee in a Starbucks in Seattle. It's a pretty long story. I won't go into it. And in my spare time, I'm a trustee for a wheelchair basketball club, the Thames Valley Kings. I head up the marketing team and I do tons of creative stuff. I also coach the sport and I wear the mascot outfit. Okay, so for this presentation, I have got some considerations for you. Today, I won't be talking to you about how DAM is implemented at Stanley Black Decker. I've previously discussed that in other talks that I've done about chasing the e-commerce unicorn, as I call it. If you're interested in finding out more about that, reach out to me and I'll provide you a link to one of the videos so you can watch that and find out more about how we do it. What I also want to do is make sure that this talk is going to be non-vendor specific. I understand everybody has their own vendor. Each vendor may have different ways of doing things or have different features, and that's absolutely great. That's why we're in this industry. I want to make this generic as possible so you can come away with having a really good understanding of what you do with your DAM, with extending its functionality and how you can do that with extensions. Next, I'll also be talking about my personal experiences, good, the bad, and the ugly. My background is technical, so when Henry Stewart asked me to kind of do this talk, I wanted to do something that was really to break down the technical stakeholder barrier that's there in businesses that implement DAM. But I want to do it in a fun way as well. I want to describe it in a way that takes my technical understandings and can really not dumb it down, but just to make it kind of a fascinating kind of journey that we can all go on. So the most important question, the first question we have is, why do we integrate? Well, the reason is really down to this journey that we're all going on in DAM, especially as we go towards DAM 3.0. And I absolutely love this diagram, and I have got the permission from the Real Story Group for it, because it just basically sums up everything about what we want to be doing. We all want feature-rich functionality that better controls our content moving forward. And two-way integrations between all our systems in the environment is helpful. Doesn't matter where in the MarTech stack it is. It just allows us to be able to pull in and out information across our entire creation through to our end solution. We want to make sure that we constantly are integrating and setting up systems further down the food chain and making sure that everything is working fine. If a system could do it automatically, it just makes sense in my mind. Also, we want to make sure that we're measuring the success or failures. What we're doing, we want to make sure we're monitoring any unique KPIs that we're doing, making sure that, and those KPIs can be incredibly unique to our business. So ensuring that you have a certain number of hits on a campaign or making sure that you're reaching your audience is incredibly important, especially when you're selling something and you've got competitors that are also selling something. You have to be on top of that market. And the only way we can do that is through having unique KPIs and measurements and analytics to make sure that what we're doing is on the right track. If not, we don't have to scrap everything and start again. We can just change our path slightly and hope for a better kind of solution. So again, next question is pretty simple here. What do we integrate? Now, the answer to this is pretty simple. We can pretty much automate and integrate with everything. So that's whether that's applications used in MarTech, things like automating image and video content to go out to our content management systems, our CMS systems, the Drupals, the WordPresses of the world. Any pre-population of alt tags and or metadata for search engine optimization, connecting content directly to landing pages, A/B testing pages, populating metadata with content curation tools so they enable us to be able to perform a great amount of content that's going out. Preparing content for our content marketing platforms, ensuring that we've got rich media tools, video and its marketing platforms. We also want to touch base on social media and CRM and analytics and web tag predictive. The list is endless. And we also might want to grab data sources that appear in our systems. We might have systems that sit and store relevant information. We might want to start populating into our DAM, so it makes users of those systems have the ability for them to be able to search and find asset and content, as well as be able to power our omni-channel experience moving up the food chain. Export channels, web, print, data, content, and also process automation. It's a huge thing right now about how we've got digital librarians that are adding copy in and doing the same things day in, day out. We can use extensions and customizations to be able to enable us to enrich that metadata automatically for them based on information that we already know about that user and what that user is using it for. So we've got some great ways of reasons for why we want to integrate. So how do we integrate? Well, there's three main aspects here. We have customizations. Now, I know just by saying that word, a lot of you are freaking out. It's fine. We'll get to customizations in just a little short while. And that basically means that we make the changes to the core system to meet our business needs. We have extensions. We've got vendors out there and their partners usually doing comprehensive frameworks and having pre-built connectors, plugins, add-ins, and low-code platform integrations. And that's great. That's fantastic. We also have custom extensions where we develop our own custom connectors and plugins and add-ons using APIs, webhooks, and other development tools that really allow us to grab the information out that we need. It might be because of a shortcoming, because of an extension. It might be because we have to integrate something that's further beyond the control of what a vendor would usually work with. First things first, customizations. This is the Frankenstein that everyone seems to hate. Me too, by the way. Now, with customizations, back in the old days, long ago, when grasshoppers owned small businesses, if you wanted your DAM to do something outside of the box, you may have had to write a piece of code to customize your DAM. That's fine. You usually get an implementation partner, or you'd get a vendor to do that for you. That's fine. When you did this work, you would tap into the core solution itself. So you'd actually go in and you would modify the core solution. Now, you would write a specific piece of code to a version of their API that was there, which required development and knowledge and experience. And you'd add in your new features directly to those core applications. And eventually you would slowly create this monster that would have a lot of technical debt because you would basically own the solution. Also because you would have hosted the solution, as this was more kind of an on-premise problem that we used to have. You would have that large technical debt that would be made up. And in turn, you would also have a high cost of ownership, as you were directly responsible for the maintenance of any ongoing projects that you would have. So upgrading your system, and you would have to upgrade your code as well, and then redeploy everything. And I've spent a lot of working long nights, weekends, upgrading from code from individual servers, fixing issues, recompiling code, smoke tests. It's, when I say it's kind of an older way of working, it really is. I've not actually had to deal with an on-premise solution now for a couple of years. I've done a few migrations from the on-premise solutions, but in my experience, this was always the most horrible way. Now, me rambling on, talking about it might confuse some of you. So I've done this little diagram here. Now, traditionally, when an event happens in your DAM, a default action would happen that the vendor would set up, and then you get the result of the action. Pretty simple. You do something in the DAM, something happens, you get a result of it. Now, what would happen, because you would have in an on-premise solution, and have to go down a customization route, is that you'd have little to no extendability in terms of what you were able to hook into. So you'd have no page hooks or any events or anything like that. And you would do this thing called overlaying. Now, what overlaying is, it literally goes bang. What would happen is that you would overwrite basically what the event that would, you would leave the event alone, but you'd customize the action of that event. It seems simple, but if you imagine doing that multiple times to fix a lot of issues and customizing something to make it work the way you want it to work, then you would ultimately get a lot of headaches down the road. Now, bit of a lowdown on what we're talking about with customizations here. Although it's typically frowned on, it did have some advantages, believe it or not. You were able to customize your processing, your workflow incredibly specifically. If you didn't like a piece of functionality, you'd literally just get rid of it. And it was fine. It worked great for a number of years. You have any security concerns, you can integrate that directly into the solution. You had flexibility and some compatibility. So if you, whatever you want to achieve, you had the ability to do that. It also allows you to build, if you wanted to, a real competitive advantage against any of your competition, which they may lack. And you could do a cost-benefit analysis of the customization just to make sure that you're only changing the parts of the dam that needed to give you that unique competitive advantages. But by doing so, you would really have that competitive advantage because nobody else would have a solution like you. A word of warning, though, that from my personal experience, sometimes customizations just don't or won't work because it's a symptom of management issues where you're not dealing with the problem at hand. You're more dealing with the fact that there is a resilience to adopting new business process or modifying them slightly to meet any of the software functionalities that are offered, or the processes weren't defined fully, so you customize it and it doesn't really work as you would expect. So some considerations for you if you do ever go down the customization route with the functionality, just ensure that your code still works against the code base, follow the best practices that are offered. Also look at performance. You may want to ensure that you're using the best practices based on what the vendor suggests. So things like lazy loading, so you load what you need rather than everything. And also just be aware of limitations. If you're going on-premise, hardware is an expense and it can eat into your budget incredibly quickly. So now we've moved across from the on-premise, the old way of working with customizations. We've got this idea of extensions, plugins, whatever you want to call it. I like to think of this as the Clint Eastwood approach. A lot of people are probably thinking, you're a madman. Why are you thinking of Clint Eastwood in this scenario? Well, why Clint Eastwood? Well, like Clint, extensions fill many roles. Now, Clint is a fantastic actor, he's a film director, he's a composer, and he's a producer. And in most cases, you know, he got the job done. He won a few Oscars, did fantastic. And in most cases, with the extension, plugins, connectors, integrations, or whatever your vendor decides to call them approaches, just like Clint Eastwood, from Dirty Harry to $1 Million Baby, there's a wide range of roles to his resume, and there's also a wide range of roles that can be covered by extensions. The flexibility is nice to have. You still have some technical debt if you have licensing fees or usage terms to meet, but the total cost of ownership is much lower in those days. So on this next page, just give you a bit of lowdown on that, and you're probably noticing there's more downs than ups, but don't be discouraged. The ups outweigh the downs here by a factor of probably about 10, to be honest. They're also bold in here for that very reason. Now, vendors and partners build a wide variety of connectors that are ready for configuration. A large number of platforms are supported. There's low effort, usually just a few lines of configuration or setup. But you have to bear in mind that you may not find a connector that you require. That depends on whether the vendor will, or if at all have the minds to put down on their roadmap, or if they think there's a business justification on their end to be able to justify the actual development cost it would be for them to be able to develop it for you. I've also come across this next one before. The connector may have limited functionality or limitations that limit its use for you. Now, if your setup is particularly complex, I'm aware of one of the vendors that I worked with had a lovely connector to our CDN, our content delivery network, where all our images went to. I did some testing locally, fell in love with it. absolutely amazing. It was quick, it was fast, it was amazing. But unfortunately, it had one key feature that was missing that we used. Because of that, it was a complete deal breaker, and we actually had to port over some existing code to one of my migration projects that we worked on it. So just be mindful that although the connector may be available, it may have some limitations that you have. Also, one of the key factors that I would look at too is performance issues when you scale it to the real world. This could be in the event of there being lots of users using it on a concurrent basis, or it could be the fact that you have users across the world and certain locations, like myself, have pretty low bandwidth. And if that's the case, you may find that they have performance hits on any connectors that they built. It happens. I've seen it happen before. I've seen another vendor that I've worked with in the past have a connector to a suite of software that was great, but as soon as I implemented it for somebody else and they were in a different geographic location to me and had slower internet connections, they found that they had a huge performance hit and it ended up being unusable for them. So just bear that in mind. I'm not having a dig at vendors. Vendors probably hate me right now for mentioning that, but it's something, if you're a damn implementer, we'll have to consider. Also, be considerate, and this is less likely to happen these days, but the latest version of any connected software that you have may not yet be supported, or the release of the connector may be a couple of months behind when the installation is available for the software itself. So some considerations there. Ensure that the extension meets your functional needs. Please perform cost value analysis. Ask yourself, does it work as I expect it to for what I'm paying for it, if you're having to pay for it? Is it an effort to use it? Does it actually save me time? If it saves you time, fantastic. Does it work for my end user? Like we were just talking about the geographic implications. Will it work for those guys? And do analysis of the performance as you're doing it. Bring users in one or a few groups at a time and make sure they have a great experience. If you have users in low bandwidth countries or areas, pay specific details with those guys, make sure that they're exactly happy, and I don't think you'll go wrong. Evaluate the user experience and the time to execute. Does it do what I want to do in a timely manner? Does it have the ability to delay any executions for quieter times? Because one of the things you don't want to be doing is running process-heavy processes during the day when users are trying to access downloads or trying to actually use a damn system. Do you need to train the users, or is it initiative enough for users to be able to go in, log into your DAM and work out what they need to do? And evaluate any security risks that you have. If a connector uses specific permissions, can those permissions leave a hole open for unauthorized users? Now, I'm talking about people like hackers or anybody that might want to get into your systems. So make sure you do a security evaluation of anything that you might have, so your data doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And custom extensions now. So this is the next stage on. We've talked about the old way of doing customizations. We talked about extensions and how you can get plugins and connectors and integrations that are supplied by the vendor. What happens if you can't get a connector from a vendor? Well, you go down the route of a custom extension. I like to call this the Bob the Builder approach. The reason being is going to be very clear, but before we do, I want to share a really quick story with you. I've been attending a lot of these conferences over the last few years, and I've noticed something. There's a myth circulating. Now, that myth is quite simple. Customizations and custom extensions, aren't they just the same thing? And one of the things that I want to know is, why did this myth start? You know, where did it start to percolate? Where did it really start flowing? And with COVID-19, I was stuck in a virtual conference a while ago, and I distinctly remember during the chat on one of the conferences, somebody asked a question about how to evaluate a DAM. And of course, as the discussion continued, and it's bing, 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 bing. Somebody goes and talks about customizations and how they were really bad. They were evil and should never be attempted, and they were like the second coming of Hitler. However, the more I was listening in on this conversation, I noticed that nobody talked about actually extending the functionality using kind of the best practices that we do under SaaS. And obviously, when you buy a DAM system, it's going to do 99.5% of everything that you want it to do, but sometimes you might need to customize it and do an action or do something that the vendor hasn't included. And it's going to be impossible to actually buy an off-the-shelf piece of kit and it meets 100% of your needs. And this is where I think extensions and custom extensions come into the matter. And during this conference, nobody really mentioned about the fact that, you know, we should be looking at how we can extend it to meet those specific business requirements that we have. Maybe it's because people actually think they're too complicated, like you require a PhD in computer science or you need to be a CTO of a startup to even consider talking about integrations and doing things yourself. Maybe vendors should be handling that for you. But if you're the only customer to a vendor that needs a certain extension, it's going to be very hard for you to justify to the vendor why they should be spending the effort working with you to get a official connector out. They're more likely to talk to you and say, hey, we can work with you on getting a custom extension and working with you and maybe a couple of your developers to get that done. I think the last thing is, I think people have just been burnt from the past experience. A lot of the customization, as we spoke about earlier, dealt with changing the core product. And that might have caused like a bad experience when upgrading or breaks that occur when upgrades happen. And I think as an industry, we've got to realize they're two different things. We've got to stop thinking about being burnt by customizations and start thinking about the functionality and the great things we could potentially build with custom extensions. So for custom extensions, we require application knowledge and experience. You're going to need a developer. You're going to need somebody who knows the underlying ways of how your DAM is going to work. You're going to need to either change existing or add new features. And you do that incredibly differently to the overlaying that you do with the customizations we spoke about earlier. It's becoming the industry standard for SaaS applications. You have a REST API, you have webhooks, you have the ability to connect to those and talk directly to the system and the system core without actually having to customize anything in the core. The core literally just tells you what to do and you tell the core what to do and it does it. It's not like a case of, I need you to do X and it does Y. It's more a case of, hey, core, I want you to do X and produce me Y, please. And the core goes off and does it. One of the things that we might want to do here is, we're obviously not going to be modifying any of the code. It's easier to maintain and upgrade in the long run. Connecting to software here. So if you've got older in-house software, you're probably going to want to use a custom extension to be able to grab that. If you have company-specific data pools, this is perfect to be able to do that. I mean, if you have information in a specific way, the vendor isn't going to likely to know what data structure yours is in, if it's very customer specific. And also you can use it to enrich the experience for the end user, which we'll touch base on in a couple of slides. So the basic process behind the scenes happens. Well, now we have event hooking. So we're able to say when this event happens, rather than the system going, I do this action when this happens, you could say, when this action happens, do something, and then call one of your integrations, go off to the REST API and do the work, modify the asset, release the asset, expire the asset, whatever you want to do. The first two bits are actually now with SaaS solutions available out of the box. So in fact, every DAM system that I've come across in the last 5 or 6 years now that have moved over to the DAM SaaS model have that availability out of the box for you to use webhooks and APIs to be able to do it, and being able to call integrations directly via the actions. And then you have either an Azure function or you can have a AWS function, independent of the core, do the work. So as part of our lowdown, our positives, we have the flexibility. We have the ability to build our extensions that require us not to recompile the entire application or do anything that would be usually required in our overlapping method with customizations. Custom extensions reduce the cost of upgrading to a new version, as this approach eliminates costly code deployment or any metadata conflicts that you might have. The vendor is able to install, patch, upgrade, change internal bits without affecting your customizations to a very large extent. Therefore, there's just a considerable improvement in the quality of the service moving forward. So you just need to do smoke tests when available. And also you have high cohesion, meaning that you're keeping parts of a code base that are related to each other in a single place. Vendor looks after core, I look after customizations. There is some downsides to this. You do need some technical knowledge. There is some TCO, technical costs of ownership, and you do need to watch out for performance issues and security issues moving forward. Now, have a quick example here. I know I'm running a little bit out of time, but I'll give you an example here. So we have a product asset that might be uploaded into our system based on naming convention rules specified by a business. We can prepare that information based on the file names and build a real quick custom extension for our DAM that allows us that to happen. So what that basically means is because this asset is called ABC123_1, I can have a piece of custom code that can store those naming conventions, and it can say, that naming convention means it's a beauty image. So I can tag any metadata or classifications or any controlled vocabularies with that information straight up the bat. Based on the next one, I think is pretty cool. If you set up your permission base correctly as a contributor consumer rights, as I know a lot of you probably have, you know who the individual user is who's responsible for uploading the assets. You have their username, they're logged into the system. And from that, we can use a custom extension to automate the process of populating the data that they might have. So we already know that this user is part of tools and storage business and is a user of the ENZ region. So just by knowing who they are, we can tag information based on that. Now, if you have to upload, use the UI of the system, you might have to manually do that. And that's saving people time for our digital librarians and making it less work for them. And also, because we know who they are, maybe if they've got a data connection sorted out, like a PIM system, for instance, if you have an external PIM from your DAM, you can go off and you've got the region information, you've got the business information, we go off and get the information that we want. We're not going to replicate our entire PIM, that would just be silly, but we'll be able to pull back product information and category information directly back. We also have the ability to do custom extensions to enable us to highlight low quality assets based on particular global standards. And that was really useful for us as we move forward with Craftsman and our Lex Tools brands in 2017, where they were businesses that we acquired at Stanley Black Decker, but the assets that were brought in were failed to meet our minimum standards. So we had the ability to be able to enable us to sort those out. So some considerations. If you're doing custom extensions, please be mindful, make sure that you do comprehensive user stories, you follow the vendor's best practices, you analyze and adjust performance across the system geographically. If you're able to schedule jobs to work at certain times by delaying the execution, consider doing that. Evaluate all the time. So pay attention to the UX, the timings. Nobody likes to be stuck on a page that hangs, and do security work. And of course, please make sure you document the work so anybody that's taking over the work can understand it fully. So just to recap, we've got about a minute left, so hopefully we'll get a couple of questions in. Extendability is key to realizing DAMS 3.0. There's no limits on what we can integrate with. There's 3 ways we can do it. There's the older customization, there's the extendability, the extensions, the plugins, whatever your vendor wants to call it, and we have the customizations of custom extensions. Consider planning, performance, functionality, and any limitations that you have once you get on across that. Okay, thank you very much. My details are on the screen. Feel free to hook up with me. And I think we've got about a minute or 2 left for questions.
Peter, thank you so much. That was brilliant. I'm afraid that we don't actually have time for any questions, but if you want to get in touch with Peter, you can message him on the conference platform with your questions. And thank you, Peter, for going through that with us. I think we all really appreciated hearing kind of the full kind of journey from Frankenstein to Clint Eastwood through to Bob the Builder. So thank you for that.